The email arrived at 6:15 in the morning, subject line all caps, and the first sentence called me a safety hazard to the entire neighborhood. I am a park ranger. I moved to Lakewood, Colorado 9 months ago because the rent was reasonable and the mountains were 20 minutes away, and I thought a townhome complex with shared walls would mean I could keep my head down and work my shifts without drama. The Millstone Landing Association had other plans. The HOA here runs like a fiefdom, every rule interpreted by whoever is angriest that week, and I was rebuilding my finances after a bad year, so I could not absorb bogus fees or surprise liens. The email was from Suzanne Stewart, pool and amenities chair, who controlled building access like a bouncer and had decided my reflective snow stakes were prohibited yard displays. I had planted them 2 days earlier after the first real snowfall, bright orange fiberglass stakes every 6 feet along my driveway edge so the plow would not chew up the asphalt lip. They were safety markers, the kind you see at every mountain trailhead. Suzanne called them unapproved modifications and said I had 24 hours to remove them or face citation and towing for guests. I looked out the window and saw her across the parking lot, medium brown pixie-cut hair, purple belted wool coat, red knit hat, crouched at the curb with a small metal scraper, chipping ice off the pavement and photographing the chunks like crime scene evidence. I walked outside. The cold hit my face and I pulled my navy knit cap lower. Suzanne stood up when she saw me, scraper still in one gloved hand. I kept my tone even. "Good morning, Suzanne. I got your email." She did not smile. "Those stakes are not approved. I checked the covenants last night. There is no provision for reflective markers. I said the covenants also do not prohibit them, and they are safety equipment, not decoration." She shook her head. "You are not special, you are just loud. If I let you do this, everyone will want custom driveway markers." I pointed out that everyone could use safety stakes if they wanted, and it would probably prevent plow damage for the whole complex. She cut me off. "I am giving you until tomorrow morning. After that, any guest vehicle will be cited. I will make sure you regret moving here." I went back inside and pulled up the covenant PDF on my laptop. There was a section on exterior modifications that mentioned fences, sheds, and permanent structures. Snow stakes were temporary and removable. I emailed the management company with photos and a polite request for clarification. The reply came 3 hours later, a canned response that the portal was down for winter maintenance and all dispute documents had to be mailed. That meant I could not submit anything digitally until they fixed it, and by then, Suzanne would have already issued citations. I called the management company. The line rang 12 times and went to voicemail. I left a message. No callback. I had to be at the ranger station by 7 the next morning for a hard start time, no exceptions, and a snow emergency tow would get me fired because I would have no way to retrieve my car before shift. I could not afford that risk. That afternoon I walked the neighborhood to see who else had stakes or markers. 2 streets over, another townhome had green reflective poles along the driveway. I knocked. A woman in her 60s answered, introduced herself as Linda, said she had the same stakes for 3 winters and Suzanne had never said a word. I asked if she would be willing to write a statement if this turned into a formal dispute. She hesitated, then nodded. "Suzanne is on a power trip this year." "I will help." Linda gave me her phone number and said to text if I needed her. I walked back feeling slightly less cornered. The next morning I woke at 5:30 and checked my driveway from the bedroom window. The stakes were still there. No citation envelope on my door. I dressed, black wool coat over my ranger uniform, navy cap, and drove to work. My shift was uneventful, mostly trail checks and a minor fender bender report in the upper lot. I got home at 4 and found a printed notice zip-tied to my mailbox post. Violation pending, scheduled inspection Friday at 9, mandatory attendance. If I failed to appear, the board would proceed with enforcement and assess fees. The notice was signed by Suzanne Stewart, amenities chair. I took a photo of it with my phone, time-stamped, then brought it inside. There was also a separate envelope in my mailbox, standard HOA letterhead, informing all residents that reflective driveway markers were under review and anyone with unapproved equipment should remove it immediately to avoid fines. No names, but the timing was obvious. I called my friend Marcus, a city code enforcement officer who had helped me settle in when I first moved. I explained the situation. He laughed, not unkindly. She cannot enforce something that is not in the covenants. If the stakes are temporary and do not damage common property, she has no standing. But HOAs do not care about standing until you make them care. I asked what that meant. He said document everything, get witness statements, and if she files anything official, respond in writing with evidence. Do not let her build a paper trail that you ignored. I thanked him and hung up. I started a folder on my desktop labeled HOA Evidence and saved every email, photo, and the scan of the printed notice. Friday morning, I stood in the clubhouse parking lot at 8:55. The sky was flat gray, temperature in the low 20s, and the snowbanks along the curb were chest-high from the week's plowing. Suzanne arrived at 9 sharp in a silver SUV. She parked, got out, same purple coat and red hat, carrying a clipboard and the small metal scraper hooked to her belt loop. She walked over, no greeting. I need you to sign this compliance agreement. She held out the clipboard. The form had 3 bullet points: remove all reflective stakes by end of day, agree not to install unapproved equipment in the future, acknowledge responsibility for any guest parking violations. I read it twice. This is not in the covenants. These are new terms. She tapped the clipboard. The board has the authority to interpret safety standards. You can sign now, or we proceed with enforcement. I asked what enforcement meant. She said guest citations start tonight, and if I disputed it, the board would file a small claims action for the administrative costs of handling my non-compliance. I did not sign. I said I would wait for a formal hearing with the full board present. Suzanne's face went red. You are wasting everyone's time. You are not special. You are just loud. I stayed quiet. She turned and walked back to her SUV, slammed the door, and drove off. I photographed the unsigned form and the parking lot, timestamped both, and added them to my folder. That night I got an email from the HOA management company, finally back online. The portal was working again and they had received my original inquiry. Their response was careful and vague. The board has discretion over safety and aesthetic standards. Residents are encouraged to work directly with board members to resolve concerns. Translation: they were not going to help. I replied anyway, attaching my photos and Linda's contact information as a witness to the double standard, and asked for a written ruling on whether temporary reflective stakes violated any covenant language. I got an auto reply that my message was received and would be reviewed within 5 business days. Suzanne did not wait 5 days. Sunday afternoon, the HOA hired plow came through after a fresh 4 inches. I was inside making coffee when I heard the scrape and crunch. I looked out and saw the plow blade catch the corner of my driveway apron, tearing up a chunk of asphalt and leaving a jagged lip. The plow kept going. I pulled on my coat and boots and went outside. The damage was obvious, a 6-inch gouge along the edge where the plow had drifted too close. My stakes were still standing, untouched, doing exactly what they were supposed to do, marking the boundary. But the driver had ignored them. I took a dozen photos from multiple angles, then checked the HOA portal to see if there was a plow damage claim form. There was not. I emailed the management company again with the photos and a polite damage report. 10 minutes later, Suzanne appeared at my door. I opened it. She was holding her phone, screen facing me, showing a photo of my driveway. You caused that damage by installing unauthorized equipment. The plow driver had to swerve, and you are responsible for the repair cost. I stared at her. The stakes are 6 inches inside my property line. The plow should not have been that close. She shook her head. The driver reported an obstruction. You will be billed. I asked if she had the driver's incident report. She said the report would be provided when the invoice was ready. I said I would dispute any charge and I had documentation proving the stakes were placed correctly. She smiled, cold and tight. Good luck with that. The board meets Thursday. You can explain it to them. Then she left. I called Marcus again. He drove over that evening, walked my driveway with a tape measure, and confirmed the stakes were fully on my property and the plow damage was operator error. He took his own photos and wrote a short statement on city letterhead, not an official report but a professional opinion as a code officer. He handed it to me. This should help. If she tries to charge you, send this and they will back off. I thanked him and added it to my folder. Marcus said one more thing before he left. If she escalates, record everything. People like this hate being on record. The board meeting was scheduled for 7 on Thursday night in the clubhouse community room. I arrived at 6:50 with a folder of printed evidence, photos, timestamps, Linda's statement, Marcus's letter, the original covenant section, and a printed copy of Suzanne's threat email. The room had folding chairs arranged in 2 rows and a long table at the front. Suzanne sat at the center with 2 other board members, a man in his 50s and a younger woman I had seen around the complex. About 8 residents were scattered in the chairs. I sat in the second row. Suzanne called the meeting to order at 7 sharp and read through routine business, snow removal budget, clubhouse bookings, a complaint about trash cans left out overnight. Then she said, "Next item, driveway safety markers. We have a resident who installed reflective stakes without approval and caused plow damage. I request the board authorize a repair invoice and a compliance order." I raised my hand. Suzanne looked at me. "You will have a chance to speak." I said I would like to speak now, since the item directly concerns me. The male board member, name tag said Gerald, nodded. "Go ahead." I stood, opened my folder, and laid out the facts. The stakes are temporary safety markers, placed on my property, intended to prevent plow damage. The covenants do not prohibit them. The plow driver damaged my driveway by driving too close, and I have photos proving the stakes were correctly placed. I also have a witness statement from another resident who has used similar stakes for 3 years without issue, and a letter from a city code officer confirming the stakes are legal and appropriate. I handed copies to Gerald and the other board member. Suzanne did not reach for one. Gerald read the letter. The other board member, her name tag said Paula, flipped through the photos. Gerald looked at Suzanne. "Do we have the plow driver's incident report?" Suzanne said it was being prepared. Paula asked when. Suzanne said soon. Gerald frowned. "If the stakes are on his property and the covenants do not mention them, I do not see a violation." Suzanne leaned forward. "We have the authority to enforce community standards. This sets a bad precedent." Paula said, "Only if we make it a precedent. I think we should table this until we see the plow report." Gerald agreed. Suzanne's jaw tightened, but she nodded. Tabled. The meeting moved on. I walked out at 7:45 feeling cautiously optimistic. Suzanne caught up with me in the parking lot. She was carrying the scraper again, tapping it against her palm. "You think you won tonight?" I stayed quiet. She stepped closer. "I am filing a complaint with the management company for harassment and defamation. You told the board I am making this up." I said I never used those words. She said, "You called my integrity into question. That is defamation. I will make sure there are consequences." Then she walked to her SUV and left. I went home and checked my email. Nothing yet. I tried to sleep, but my mind was spinning through scenarios. 2 days later, Monday morning, I got a certified letter. It was a small claims court filing from Suzanne Stewart, individual capacity, claiming I had caused reputational harm and demanding $1,200 in damages for emotional distress and time spent addressing my violations. The filing listed the board meeting as evidence that I had publicly accused her of lying. I read it 3 times. It was absurd, but it was real, and I had 30 days to respond or face a default judgment. I called an attorney I had consulted once before, a guy named David who handled landlord-tenant disputes. He listened, then said, "This is a slap suit. She is trying to shut you up. You can fight it, but it will cost you time and filing fees. If you ignore it, she wins by default. If you respond, she will probably drop it before trial because she has no case, but she is betting you cannot afford the hassle." I asked what I should do. He said file a response, attach your evidence, and counterclaim for frivolous filing if you want to push back. I do not recommend that unless you are ready to go all the way. I told him I was ready. He said he could help me draft the response for a flat fee, $200. I agreed. That same week, Suzanne sent another HOA-wide email. Subject line, Community Safety Update. The body text did not name me, but it described a resident who had installed unapproved hazards, refused to comply with board guidance, and was now disrupting meetings with baseless accusations. It said the board was taking all necessary steps to protect the community and asked residents to report any similar violations. I forwarded it to David. He replied within an hour. "That is your evidence." She just defamed you in writing to the entire HOA. Print it, save the email headers, and we will attach it to your counterclaim. I did. I also forwarded it to Linda, who replied, "This is insane. I am writing my statement tonight." Linda sent me a 2-page signed statement with photos showing her green reflective poles, installation dates, and a note that Suzanne had approved her landscaping plan 3 years ago without mentioning the poles. The statement also included a detail I had not known. Suzanne had tried to fine another resident last summer for a decorative mailbox post, and the management company had overruled her because the post met covenant specs. Linda wrote, "Suzanne does not like being told no. She will keep pushing until someone stops her." I printed the statement and added it to my folder. David finished the response filing on Friday. It included my evidence, Linda's statement, Marcus's letter, and a counterclaim for abuse of process. The filing fee was $75. I paid it online and submitted everything to the court. The clerk's office confirmed receipt and scheduled a hearing for mid-February, 6 weeks out. I emailed a copy of the filing to Suzanne's attorney, listed on her original complaint. No reply. 2 days later, Sunday afternoon, I was shoveling my front walk when Suzanne appeared with her scraper. She walked up to the property line and pointed at the stakes. "These are still here." I said the board tabled the issue and I was waiting for the plow report. She said, "The plow report confirms you caused the damage. You will be billed $350. I asked to see the report. She said it was confidential. I said, "If it is the basis for a charge, it is not confidential. I have a right to see it." She stepped closer, voice rising. "You do not get to make demands. You are in violation, and you are going to pay." I kept my tone flat. "I am not paying for damage I did not cause. If you have a report, provide it. If you do not, stop threatening me." She pulled out her phone and took a photo of me. "I am documenting your hostile behavior." I said, "I am not being hostile. You are on my property, and I asked you to leave." She said, "This is common area sidewalk. I can stand here as long as I want." I said nothing. She took another photo, then turned and walked away. I went inside and immediately wrote an incident report with the date, time, and her exact words. I emailed it to David and asked if her photographing me was legal. He replied, "It is legal, but it is also evidence of harassment. Keep a log. If she contacts you again, do not engage. Let her build her own case against herself." The bill arrived 3 days later. Certified mail. $350 for asphalt repair. Due in 15 days or subject to late fees and lien filing. I scanned it and forwarded it to the management company with my original damage photos and a request for the plow driver's incident report under the records request provision in the covenants. The management company replied that plow contractor reports were operational documents and not available to residents. I replied that if they were using a report to justify a charge, I had a right to see it. They did not respond. I paid the bill under protest and noted it in my records. David said paying under protest preserved my right to dispute it later and stopped them from putting a lien on my unit. I hated giving Suzanne the money, but I could not risk a lien while my credit was still recovering. The next morning I got another HOA email, this time announcing that the Amenities Committee was conducting a neighborhood safety audit and residents should expect courtesy inspections of driveways, walkways, and exterior storage areas. Violations would be addressed promptly. The email included a new complaint hotline number for reporting concerns. I did not recognize the number format. It looked like a Google Voice line. Marcus came over that weekend. I showed him the hotline number. He ran it through a reverse lookup and found nothing, no name, no linked address. He said, "That is not an official county or city line. Someone set that up privately. I bet it is hers." I asked if that was illegal. He said, "Not illegal, but very sketchy. If she is funneling complaints to herself and then acting on them as if they came from the community, that is fraud. You need to prove it." I asked how. He said, "Call the number and see who answers. Do not give your name. Just report a fake issue and see what happens." I called from a secondary phone number I used for work contacts. A voicemail greeting played, generic robotic voice. "Leave a message with your address and concern." I left a vague message about a trash can issue at a random unit number on the far side of the complex. 2 hours later, Suzanne sent an HOA-wide email about trash can compliance and cited the exact unit number I had mentioned. I screenshot the email and the call log and sent both to David. He replied, "That is your twist. She is manufacturing complaints. File a formal fraud report with the management company and demand an audit of all recent violations. If they refuse, it is leverage for your counterclaim." I drafted the fraud report and submitted it through the portal with the evidence. The management company responded in 2 days. They said they took all allegations seriously and would review the matter, but they could not share findings due to confidentiality. They also said my counterclaim against Suzanne was a separate legal matter and they could not comment on pending litigation. Translation: they were going to protect the board and hope I went away. Suzanne escalated again. Wednesday morning, 1 week before the court date, I found a notice on my windshield. Guest parking enforcement begins tonight. Any vehicle without a resident permit will be cited or towed. My girlfriend was supposed to visit that weekend. She did not live in the complex, so her car would count as a guest. I called the management company and asked about the guest permit process. They said guest permits were issued by the amenities committee and required 24 hours advance notice. I asked how to request one. They said contact Suzanne Stewart. I laughed, and hung up. I texted Linda and asked if she had ever needed a guest permit. She said no, she had never heard of it, and she had family visit all the time without issue. I called Marcus. He said, "That is retaliatory. She is making up rules to punish you. If she tows your girlfriend, you call the police and dispute it on scene. Towing without proper notice is theft." I asked if I should cancel the visit. He said, "Do not let her win like that. Just document everything and be ready to fight it." Thursday night, the snow started again, heavy wet flakes that stuck to everything. I got a text from my girlfriend Emily asking if the roads were bad. I said they were fine, but there might be a parking issue. I explained the situation. She said, "I am not letting some HOA psycho keep me away. I will park on the street if I have to." I told her I appreciated it and I would handle it. Friday afternoon, I shoveled my walk, cleared my driveway, and made sure the stakes were visible and upright. Emily arrived at 6. I met her in the lot and walked her to the guest spot near my unit. No notice on her windshield. We went inside. At 8:30, I heard a diesel engine outside. I looked through the window and saw a tow truck idling in the lot, yellow flashers spinning. The driver was standing next to Emily's car with a clipboard. Suzanne was beside him, pointing and talking. I grabbed my phone, pulled on my coat and boots, and went out. I walked up and said, "That is my guest. You cannot tow without notice." The driver said, "I got a call for unauthorized parking. Lady says no permit." I looked at Suzanne. There is no guest permit requirement in the covenants. She said, "Effective this week, all guest vehicles require advance registration. You did not register." I said, "You cannot create a new rule without a vote and proper notice." She smiled. "I can enforce safety measures. Your guest is parked illegally." The driver looked uncomfortable. He said, "I need this sorted out. If there is a dispute, I am not hooking up." Suzanne handed him a paper. "This is the board authorization." He looked at it, then at me. I said, "I am calling the police." Suzanne said, "Go ahead. They will side with the property owner." I dialed. The Lakewood police arrived 12 minutes later, 2 officers in a patrol car. One of them, a sergeant named Callahan, asked what was happening. I explained the situation calmly. No guest permit rule in the covenants, no advance notice of a new policy. The board member is retaliating because of a separate legal dispute. Suzanne interrupted. "He is lying. We sent an email last week." Callahan asked to see it. She pulled out her phone, scrolled, then stopped. She said, "It was sent to the board." Callahan said, "So the residents did not get notice." Suzanne said, "They are supposed to check the portal." Callahan turned to the tow driver. "Do you have a signed tow authorization from the property owner?" The driver said, "I have this paper from her." Callahan looked at it. "This is not property owner letterhead. This is a personal printout." He handed it back. I am not authorizing this tow. If you want to pursue it, contact the management company and get proper documentation." The driver shrugged, climbed back in his truck and drove off. Suzanne turned to Callahan. "You just let him harass me." Callahan said, "Ma'am, I de-escalated a civil dispute. If you believe he is harassing you, you can file a report." Suzanne said, "I am filing a report right now." Callahan pulled out a notepad. "Go ahead." Suzanne opened her mouth and closed it. She said, "I will submit it through channels." Then, she walked to her SUV and left. Callahan looked at me. "You have documentation of all this?" I said I did. He said, "Good. Keep it that way. If she keeps pushing, you might need a restraining order." He got back in his car and left. I stood in the lot for a minute, snow falling, feeling the weight of the whole mess pressing down. Emily came outside. She had watched from the window. She hugged me. That was completely unhinged. I said I knew. She asked what happened next. I said, "Court date is next week. If I win, this stops. If I lose, I probably have to move." She squeezed my hand. "You are going to win." I wanted to believe her. The weekend passed quietly. I worked Saturday and Sunday, long shifts checking trails and clearing storm debris. Monday morning, I got an email from the management company. Subject line, "Compliance agreement required." The email said the board had reviewed my case and determined that my refusal to cooperate was creating ongoing issues. They were requiring me to sign a revised compliance agreement that included removal of all reflective markers, advance notice for any future exterior changes, and acknowledgement of responsibility for plow damage costs. If I did not sign by Friday, they would proceed with formal enforcement including fines, lien filing, and restriction of amenity access. The email was copied to the full board and the management company president. I forwarded it to David. He called me 10 minutes later. "This is exactly what we need. She is trying to force a confession in writing. Do not sign anything. We are going to use this at trial." I asked if the management company could really file a lien. He said, "They can try, but if your counterclaim succeeds and you prove the charges are retaliatory and fraudulent, any lien will be dismissed, and they will owe you fees. It is a gamble, but you are holding better cards than they think." I did not sign. Friday came and went. No follow-up from the management company. Monday morning, 3 days before the court date, I got a text from an unknown number. "You are going to lose, and everyone will know you are a liar." I screenshot it and sent it to David. He said, "Do not respond. If it is her, she just handed you more evidence. If it is not her, it is someone acting on her behalf, and that is still useful." I blocked the number. Tuesday, the day before the hearing, Suzanne sent one more email. Subject line, "Final notice." It said I had failed to comply with the board compliance order and formal enforcement would begin immediately. Effective tonight, I was banned from using the clubhouse, gym, and pool facilities until I resolved my outstanding violations. Any attempt to access amenities would result in trespassing charges. The email was sent to the full resident list. Linda called me an hour later. She is unhinged. "Half the complex thinks you are some kind of criminal." I told her I was going to court tomorrow and I had everything I needed. She said, "Good. Because if you do not stop her, no one is safe here." That night I could not sleep. I kept rehearsing my statement, organizing my folder, checking the alarm. I had to be at work by 7, but the hearing was at 9, so I had requested the morning off. My supervisor was not happy, but he approved it. At 6 I got up, showered, dressed in my cleanest khakis and a button-down shirt under my black coat. I ate a quick breakfast and drove to the courthouse. The roads were clear, but the parking lot was a sheet of packed ice. I walked carefully to the entrance, checked in at the clerk's window, and sat in the hallway outside the small claims courtroom. Suzanne arrived at 8:50 with a man in a suit, probably her attorney. She did not look at me. They went into the courtroom and sat at the plaintiff table. I sat at the defendant table. The judge, a woman in her 60s with short gray hair and reading glasses, called the case at 9:15. Stewart versus the defendant, case number, etc. She asked Suzanne to present her claim. Suzanne stood. Your Honor, the defendant has repeatedly violated HOA rules, damaged common property, and publicly defamed me at a board meeting and in communications with other residents. I am seeking $1,200 for emotional distress and time lost dealing with his refusal to comply. The judge asked if she had evidence. Suzanne handed over a folder. The judge flipped through it, emails, photos of my stakes, a printed copy of the meeting minutes. The judge asked me to respond. I stood. Your Honor, I installed temporary safety markers on my own property to prevent plow damage. The HOA covenants do not prohibit them. The plaintiff escalated this dispute by threatening me, filing a frivolous lawsuit, and defaming me in a mass email to all residents. I am countersuing for abuse of process and requesting dismissal of her claim with fees. I handed the judge my folder. She took her time, reading Linda's statement, Marcus's letter, the email screenshots, the fake hotline evidence, and the compliance agreement demand. She looked up. Miss Stewart, did you send an email to the HOA membership describing the defendant as a safety hazard and accusing him of baseless accusations? Suzanne hesitated. I described the situation accurately. The judge said, That is not what I asked. Did you send the email? Suzanne said, Yes. The judge asked, Do you have a plow driver incident report? Suzanne said, It is being finalized. The judge said, So you do not have it? Suzanne said, The driver confirmed the obstruction. The judge said, Without a written report, that is hearsay. The judge turned to me. You have a statement from a code enforcement officer that the stakes are legal. Suzanne's attorney stood. Your Honor, that is not an official inspection. The judge cut him off. It is a professional opinion from a city employee with relevant expertise. It carries more weight than an unsigned hearsay claim. She closed both folders. I am dismissing the plaintiff's claim with prejudice. The defendant's counterclaim for abuse of process is granted. The plaintiff will reimburse the defendant's filing fees and attorney consultation costs, total $275, within 30 days. Additionally, I am ordering the HOA board to revise its enforcement policy to require documented evidence before assessing charges. This court finds that the plaintiff used the legal system to harass the defendant over a non-existent violation. Case closed. Suzanne's face went white. She started to speak, but her attorney touched her arm and shook his head. The judge stood and left the courtroom. I packed my folder and walked out. Suzanne and her attorney stayed at their table, talking in low, urgent voices. I did not wait. I drove back to my complex, went inside, and sat at my kitchen table for a long time, just breathing. The management company called me that afternoon. The president, a man named Roger, said he had been informed of the court decision and the board was holding an emergency meeting to discuss next steps. He said, We want to resolve this and move forward. I said, The judge already resolved it. You owe me $275 and you need to change your enforcement policy. He said, We will process the refund. As for the policy, we are working on revised language. I said the judge ordered it. It is not optional. He said, I understand. We will comply. Then he paused. For what it is worth, I am sorry this got so out of hand. I said, It did not have to. He agreed and hung up. Linda called that evening. She had heard about the ruling through the neighborhood grapevine. She was laughing. Suzanne is furious. She tried to call another board meeting tonight, but Gerald and Paula both said no. I heard she might resign. I said I would believe it when I saw it. Linda said, You did the right thing. Someone had to stand up to her. I thanked her for the statement. She said, Any time. This place needs more people like you. The refund check arrived 16 days later, certified mail, with a cover letter from the management company confirming the policy update. The new enforcement protocol required photo evidence, third-party verification for damages, and a formal dispute process before any charges could be assessed. It also suspended the fake complaint hotline and required all violation reports to go through the portal with identity verification. I cashed the check and filed the letter in my folder. Suzanne did not resign. She stayed on the board but stopped attending meetings in person, sending written statements instead. I never spoke to her again. She moved out 6 months later, sold her unit, and left the complex. Paula took over as amenities chair and the culture shifted. Enforcement became predictable and fair. Complaints were handled through proper channels. The fake hotline disappeared. I kept the reflective stakes up through the rest of that winter and the next. No one ever mentioned them again. The plow drivers learned to watch the edges, and the damage stopped. I stayed in the complex for 3 more years, eventually bought my own place in the foothills, and moved out on good terms. I still see Marcus every few months for coffee. He always asks if I am dealing with any HOA nonsense at the new place. I tell him no, and he says, "Good. You earned some quiet." But I kept the folder, every email, every photo, every statement. I did not chase her accusations, because I already had the receipts. And when I finally dropped it in a calm 2-sentence statement in that courtroom, the silence did the damage. The judge saw it. The board saw it. Suzanne saw it. "You are not special. You are just loud." She said that to me twice, early on, trying to make me back down. By the end, I did not have to say it back. The ruling said it for me.